Tonight I've been playing with my Pro Studio. If you want a photo of what that looks like from the side, feel free to join the Discord server and find out. I'm Tom Lees, making the Recall Singularity. Now what follows will be a few minutes of futzing around while I just make sure everything is sorted out from my end. So if you'll just bear with me, I'll get straight to it. First things first, I'm going to bring up create a dashboard. It's going to show me all the good things about the stream as we go along. What else did I need to do? Yes, so I need to mention in the Discord that we're now streaming so that people will come. Just writing a streaming message to the Discord. So, in fact, there's your photo of my gorgeous, gorgeous studio. Gotta love that chair. It's a bit worn out now. Bought it from my old employer at the time. Always a good idea. So this Discord is a vibrant little community. I'd love for you to join if you haven't already, if you're not already part of my community. Gonna go across to Twitter. Hello, welcome to the stream. Go across to Twitter. I feel bad writing another tweet every day, but Rust development, Rust plus Godot development for the next 2 hours. Gonna refactor my Godot and Rust, Godot and specs, Rust bindings today. That's gonna be good fun. That's our purpose. Tweet. Hopefully no one's dreadfully offended to find that in their list of tweets today. So I'm going to do something different. I've got set myself a little photo. Set myself a little photo for my profile. Title. So update information. So that's our plan. Close that. Oh, oops, I didn't mean to close the dockable window. Docs. What have we got? Stream information. Great. Put that back up. What else do I need to do? Oh yes, the last thing to do is watch people code. And then once that's all set up, we can jump across the C line and start the job at hand. So this is what we're going to be working on today. Let me jump across to Reddit and add myself to watch people code. I wonder if having this live dashboard up on the screen is going to drive me a little bit insane. I always find that knowing how many people are watching is always a little bit frightening. Yeah, let's see. Watch people code. So has everyone had a nice day today? I know it's, yeah. Feel free to type in the chat how your day was. Today I know I just can't sit still watching people coming into the Discord every day, watching new people reading the blog entries and get excited about what they can do with Godot and Rust. It's always quite amazing. It's very hard to settle down and actually do any of my other work I'm supposed to be doing, which means I can't bill for it, which means, oh, that's always a problem. So I get on top of that one. Don't worry about me, I'll get on top of that. Link. So it's the Godot plus Rust, the recall Singularity refactoring and the URL is going to be the Twitch URL, which is we call Singularity Twitch. So we're almost done. So this is the whole idea of actually hi Weird Constructor. Thank you for reminding me about the font size. By the way, everybody, you should say hi and thank you to Weird, because he's the one who pointed out that he'd like to see me stream in the first place. And so it's because of him that we're streaming it all. So is that big enough? Because I don't know how big I can manage. And he told me that I should always put my stuff and watch people code. So hopefully it's a nice source of viewers. Feel free to say hello. I'm just going to be 1 second. Okay, here I am. Yes, it is my own decision. I'm continuing because it's working for me. So thank you for the idea. I don't blame you for the horrible burden of streaming. No. So I've turned on this feature on my webcam where it's going to try and track my face. Somewhat wherever I go. Like, it does some interesting movement. So if that really pisses you off, let me know and I'll turn it off. But hopefully it means that I'm a bit bigger in picture. I also put a sheet up. I was kind of thinking of chroma keying, but which is when things go a bit colourful, but I need a proper green screen. So if I turn on the chroma key, it doesn't work very well. So here it's not doing anything, and I've chosen part of the blue sheet, and as I increase the amount of chroma keying, it kind of eats my face. Like, we probably could go for something like that, but it would be more distracting than helpful. Or something which is like, I don't know, maybe partially transparent. It just kind of highlights. I wonder what these I think change the output of the video. So this is something we could try playing with, but it's not really working. So I'm not going to do that. I need a proper green screen. And the idea is to move from having me in a little box beneath the stream to having me in something bigger. Anyway, that's enough on my setup. Let's get stuck in. So, last stream. Yeah, that's right. Who cares about what I am? Yeah, a talking head, but like below the code, so all the space around my shoulders, you can see beautiful, beautiful code rather than boring sheet. So, or messy shelves, both of which would be like a massive improvement. I also mirrored my face, so when I look at that screen, which is the one over here, so when I look at this screen, now I face it, and when I look at this screen, I face it. So there's been a few cleanups around here. What we were working on last time was moving the little person around. So let's see if anyone's upvoted. No one's upvoted me yet. I should send you guys all over there, but then you'd leave my stream, so that wouldn't be any good. So we're moving a little person around in Godot, and I'll just launch the game and show you what that looks like. So I should probably put those little shortcuts. In fact, I might just do that. I'm just going to bring these little shortcuts and launch the game and put them right here on my stream. They're currently underneath one of these, so you can see my little buttons are just down here. I'll hide them underneath my other screen so you can't even see them. You don't need to see them, they're ugly anyway. So the server started, and I'll start the game. So here's the game running. Something funny is going on here with the client though. I wonder if I stopped halfway through and it wasn't working when I last checked. Only problem now is that now I always look over there to try and find it. Here we are. This time seems to have loaded. So if I build some floor, it builds like so. So the thing we were doing before was moving this little guy here using Rust. So I'm not happy with this movement at all yet, but it's a start. So I can move him around. As you can see, he's only moving at 20 frames a second because that's the speed at which we're processing inputs at the moment. I'll move that. I'll be increasing that to 60 later. The reason why is the factory doesn't need any more than 20, so I set it at that speed for the factory. We can also move the ships, but I've hard-coded it so the cursor controls are moving the player for now. I was originally thinking my next task was going to be to allow you to start moving the ships or the player, which is a pretty awesome job, you know. So you go up to this flight desk here and you can move. Now you see this guy. This guy is completely client-side and Godot based. So you see how he moves? He's got a much higher frame rate. He moves a lot more smoothly. And when I move him, I'm not trying to turn him. He's just facing the direction that he's moving. So there's no explicit rotation keys. So, and when you face a module, it detects it and says use, like this. So what we're going to want to do eventually is get that functionality bit driven by Rust as opposed to my quick and dirty GD script, and get him out of this other guy, which, you know, he doesn't move quite the same way. He is a robot. So one problem I've been having is that I'm writing a lot of synchronization code that talks between GD script and Rust, between Godot and Rust, and that code is quite difficult to maintain and quite a pain. So I've got Star World Link, and I've got, wow, that font size is huge. Thank you very much for your huge font size. This is the class that does the communications. The problem we have with this class is that there's lots of custom code for every possible thing that I want to move. So in process, I'm creating and moving ships by hand, or in here when I've got an event for moving a ship, here I am moving a ship again. There's like a piece of code for that here. Moving bipeds has some code here. Moving ships has some more code here. So there's a lot of transforms being updated, and it's very similar in SD ship link, which again has it's loading a bunch of scenes. These are tiles for a ship, and then it's handling events: module add, module update, module remove, floor add. What I'd like to move to, instead of this approach, which is very much, it's very much every single time I add something to the game, I have to come in here and add a binding to it if it's like a different sort of idea, a different sort of thing. So you can imagine, you know, you have to add a binding for weapon, like models that are weapons, and then you have to add another binding for tiles, and a binding for ship movement, and a binding for this, and a binding for that, and it gets a bit ridiculous. So yeah, there was a profiler you saw me quit, by the way. I should have quit it earlier. It's going to hog lots of processing power. I'm just tidying up the things I've had running earlier today from my day job. Okay, so we want to be able to take a specs object. Specs is the entity component store. We want to take a specs object and have component, which is an entity, really. So specs the entity, and have components for things like transforms and so on that are related to Godot and are synchronized to Godot. And then I can have systems that do the synchronization and systems that worry about the transforms, and everything can be separate. And the systems that worry about the transforms might be separate also from Godot. So that could be nice. I could even push them back into the simulation a bit if I wanted to. Let's have a quick look through this. These are the changes we made to allow us to show the biped in Godot. So I'm just going to commit those. Move player puck in Godot to match Rust position of player. Great. Okay, so with my work committed, I should be now, these things are just temporary files. That one also needs to be committed. I'm just going to use amend commit to change the commit I just made to contain that file as well. So with that all done, we can push to the server. Great. Okay, so now the player has got the movement in here. I'm going to make a component that manages a transform and forwards it into the game, wondering if I want to transform on multiple axes, or in fact that sounds like an enumerator choice. Well, it could just be that we expose all the axes. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to expose all the axes that we could move it on. So let's have a look here in Helper. There's a lot of stuff in here. In fact, I think I made components for this purpose. So we've got a GD walkable, which is a player which is in a particular world. It's probably going to turn out that most things are in a world. So they're either in a ship world or they're in space, which is world ID 0. So I might just take the approach at this point where I just start tearing the code completely to pieces. So a GD walkable is going to be a GD position sync. Okay, so the GD position sync is going to handle a subworld. So either it's going to be 0, which is the space world, which means it's based on the universe origin, or it's going to be based inside a ship. So for all these positions, we're going to use a fixed 64, which is what is used also in the rest of my Rust code. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the best decision, but I'm going to go with it. So we've got an X lock, which is fixed 64. We're going to have a Y lock. We're going to have a Z lock. We're going to have these are locations, by the way, if it wasn't obvious. So these locations, that's where it is in 3D space. This one here is up. In my game, it's really X and Z is a flat plane that is a ship. Fixed 64 is a 64-bit integer that's being used as a float. It's got a fixed portion that's it's a 48-bit number with a 16-bit fraction. So it's a pretty high resolution number. Gonna have X rotation, which is this. Y rotation, which is that, and a Z rotation, which is that. Okay, so that's our position. So there's a couple of alternatives for how this position could be used. We might use something called a facing. I guess I won't worry too much about the alternatives right this second. So something that's in the world is in a particular world at a particular location. Right. Now the other thing we need to know is whether it has a node or not. So pub struct so we've got subscenes and we've got submeshes. For a lot of intents and purposes are the same. So we'll just call it GD. GD Spatial, right? GD stands for Godot, by the way. That's why I'm calling GD, and I'm just making all the things that relate to Godot as components, just putting a GD prefix on them for now. So I'm just making a spatial in Godot is your basic 3D node. So it tracks a transform. It knows where it is in space. You can put it in a scene tree, that sort of thing. So we might have a spatial. Which is in a particular place in the scene. I bet with the spatial we can get its node path. So the main question is, someone has pointed out that my stream, I haven't linked my stream, so I'm just going to make a quick link to my stream page for this person. Just hold on a second. They pointed out on Twitter. So, bad tweet. Okay. I wonder if I should delete the original tweet. Okay, Okay, so I'm just sending a tweet to say where the link is that you already know about because you're already watching it. And then I'm going to also retweet this with the link in it. Which I've just lost because I was copying and pasting the original. Oh, it's 1 second. Tweet. There we go. Good. Did I delete the original message? Sorry about the wait here, guys. That should sort that. Okay, good. Back to it. So what I'm doing is I'm making a set of components that are going to be used from specs to replace ugly things like what you see here. So rather than doing this, I'm going to do it with components. So if a particular thing exists in a scene, so and I'll just add this here, world. In the previous video, I set up a system where I could pass. This function gets called for each of the specs worlds that's inside of my simulation. So my simulation contains the world state, what's going on. It's kind of like a board game. It takes turns, takes ticks, and the simulation code doesn't know about Godot, and because it doesn't know about Godot, it doesn't have any components that relate to Godot. So what we do is we use these two functions as opportunities to inject components. So the star components, we're adding this walkable one, which is not going to be called walkable in a second. We're going to add this to both actually. It's going to be called GD position sync, like so. So these are two Godot entities. They don't do anything yet. They're not used yet, but they'll be used soon. Here we go. So if you look at the floor one, here's my existing production floor code, and I've got a routine in here called register, which is a bit further up. Update register. This is a list of all the components that is currently registered in the world, and the cargo crate that makes that list, the one that's up there, the cargo crate that makes that list doesn't know about Godot. So we kind of have to insert a couple more, which is why we're inserting more just there. So that's where we're coming from with these. Yeah. So if we've got a spatial and position sync. If there's no spatial, we're going to need one. So the next thing we need to know is, what are we creating? So we kind of need a resource. It's going to be hold on. Our resources are going to be meshes. They're going to be scenes. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So we've got two kinds of resources. So we're going to have and these are nodes that I want to create in Godot. So right now there's two kinds of things I create. If I looked again at a picture of the game, which is go up one, look at this. So this is a screenshot from the game. This scene that contains the ship, that's a packed scene in Godot, and I want to create the whole thing. But this little console, actually I think that's also a packed scene. But some of these things might be just meshes, and so I need to be able to make meshes or scenes and manage that on load. I wonder if I could distinguish those. I was thinking that the person who's typing it in would distinguish those. Anyway, so the two things I'm going to want to store in my enumerator, which is called I don't know. It's a fabrication type, but it really is just about a stored resource, or a factory type, or a template. Yeah, let's just call it a template. But no, template's too much of a loaded word. Entity 3D template. Yeah, that'll work, I guess. So there's two kinds I care about. So one of them is going to be a scene, and the scene contains an entity called a packed scene. And the other one is going to be a mesh. And a mesh contains, let me just have a look at the mesh builder, which makes these things. Mesh placer. It places, well, it's just called a mesh. I have a reference to one here. Yeah, I think it's okay not to hold a reference and just to hold the actual object though. So a mesh contains a mesh. So these are the two things I might want to create in my scene. So we will have a system that needs to create these. So let's create a class that's going to be creating these templates. So that class, a class that does something with entities in Specs is called a system. So let me just. Okay, so this system is going to be an entity creation system, or GD entity. And so the point of the entity creation system is to instantiate a packed scene or mesh and create a node. Oh, that's another thing we need to put in here. So we've got a child world, and then we need to know the name of the parents, which is like a node path. I don't know if we can have a short. I guess we could just have a node path. I was just thinking, what do we? I'm just gonna look at what. I'm gonna do the basic version, which is just a 2-level deep tree. So, parent name, which is a string. We're gonna have a I'll probably get away with a static string pointer for that because I'm always using the same ones, and those are always hard coded. Yeah, I'm going to use a static string here, and then the child name, which is based on itself, and that's an actual string. Might be some reason why I don't want to use a static string here later on. So this now knows enough to create the thing in the right place, or maybe move it if it is created to the right parent, subparent. GD entity creation. So that needs to be a system. So so we go impl system for GD entity creation, like so, and let's just find another system as a template that I can use. Interesting. It's not called system. What is it called? Or it probably was called system, wasn't looking far. No. Oh, it's because I've got words turned on. Okay, I got myself confused. So here's a conveyor formation system which I've already made. Yeah, oh, it's because I didn't put a lifetime argument in my search terms. I didn't realize I had to do this. So this system contains something called system data. These are the things that you need for it to actually run. And then you define a function called run, which takes the system data. So the GD entity creation needs to create a spatial. I wonder if I want to parent it straight in the tree. I might just make one. I'll make. So GD entity parenting. So the point of GD entity parenting is to move something so that it has the right parent setup. So it's in the right place. We have a spatial node. We have a child world and a parent name. Child name. I wonder if I want to move this stuff down into here. So this is just like a component setup type thing. Because what I'm trying to get the idea of is that if you have a spatial, you'll have this entity already. If you haven't yet made a node in the scene, this entity won't exist. There won't be a GD spatial. So this can be created willy-nilly, this whole thing in whole cloth without knowing anything about the Godot scene and what's going on in it. We just make that, boom. Doesn't need any data from Godot. This one here is only created by GD entity parenting. In fact, it could almost be private in its own way, but it needs to be registered. So there's that. Okay, so that's where we're at. So GD entity creation. It's going to modify GD spatial. So we need to say it's got a write storage GD spatial. It's only going to read the other one. It's only going to read GD position sync. It's not allowed to modify it. So we specify that there. And so by doing that, this is weird constructed. This is what we're talking about when we were talking about ECSs earlier on Discord. We know by reading this code that which data this does not allow to modify. It's got a very limited amount of stuff it can change, and it has a very limited amount of stuff it needs to know about. And so when you see the whole system being written out, it'll make a bit more sense. But the main point is that the ECS is restricting what we need to worry about here. Those are imported. So I need to give a name which corresponds to this GD spatial here. So that would just be, I don't know, just call it GD spatial. And this one here, and that one's mutable because we're going to change it. And then this one is GD pos, like so. Don't need any of that stuff. So if a routine is given those two things, what else does it need? Well, it does need to know where everything is relative to. In fact, I'm starting to realize one great flaw in my plan. We need to know where the parents of all these worlds are for the system to work. Easiest way to do that is just to track a map of those as well as a resource. That would be the ECS way of doing it. I'm just trying to figure out if there's a better way to do it than that, a way that I like better, but it's not coming to me. So let's set it up that way. Okay, so in order for this to do its job, if this is in a subworld, it needs to be able to find the spatial that is a parent. So it needs to know where the parents of all the subworlds are. So we need a structure. This is going to be called a resource. So this structure is world parents, and so world parents contains a hash map called parents, and this hash map called parents, right? This hash map called parents, it maps a global world ID, like so, to a very specific spatial. Now, this would make more sense if I showed you my scene tree for my game, but suffice to say that my game has space, which has a spatial node for all of space, and then it has a number of little spaceships floating around which have conveyors and stuff in them. Each of those spaceships has its own spatial node to say where is it in space, and then relative to that we create all the things inside of it. So we need to have the pointer to that middle spatial of the spaceship. Space and spatial is not compatible when trying to say both at once. I hope it wasn't too confusing. GD world parents. So we can derive default, which will create an empty one of those. So if you're a star world, we really need a copy of the same structure shared across both. If you're inside of a particular floor, you only want to worry about the entities in that floor, so the world ID will always be relative to that floor. If you're inside of space, you might be placing entities all over the place. Some of them are relative to the floor, some of them are not. The other way around this problem is to call the system once for every world. Yeah, but that is the problem, that you can't move things very easily from one world to another. So, in the star world, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to create one GD entity parenting structure, and we're probably going to either share it somehow. We could share it, or we could just copy it every single time. If I shared it, then I would need to have some sort of mutex or similar to the hash map. And then we could, we can't share them. This is bothering me a bit because you've got multiple specs worlds, and it makes that particular problem a little bit messy. The other option is we could just make it so the system knows this information and it's not in a resource. It doesn't really need to be in a resource because not many people use it. Maybe. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go for the shared approach to this resource creation. So a GD entity parenting has basically, well, do we put it as a resource or as a static thing? Static's probably really ugly. Yeah, so it's going to be a spatial parents. Just call it parents. In fact, I already made world parents, didn't I? Yeah. Too much thinking, not enough typing. So we want a hash map, but we don't just want any hash map. We want the hash map to be shared. So that means we need to put it inside of an arc, which is a shared pointer. But we don't just want it to be shared. We want to be able to modify it if we want. There are awesome hash maps that allow us to do modification and reading across multiple threads, but we don't need to go that far. We don't need that sort of performance, I don't think, at the moment. So what this will allow us to do is figure out, and we might just copy this world ID down here. That'll give us a bit of a performance boost later on. This will allow us to figure out, given a world ID, what the spatial is that's the parent of that world. So we can put the node inside of that spatial. Okay, so this is me just setting up all the data I think I might need for moving entities. If I want to move an entity, I don't need to be able to modify the world parents, I just need to be able to read it. So I'm going to say here that I want to be able to read this entity. In fact, I'll probably never need to modify it because of the way arc and mutex work. They allow you to make it mutable, even if it's immutable, so you can treat constant things as being changeable. So I want to be able to read the list of parents. This also needs importing. And this is parents. Let's call this GD worlds, because we might come up with a reason to put other stuff in there later. Worlds is a bad name. GD world roots or details or data, world data, GD world data. That works for me. World data. Okay. So if we know the world data here, when we're running, why is this red? We don't need a lifetime specifier for that one, I guess. It's still not happy. Okay, so the entity creation mechanism also needs to know how to make an entity. So we probably need to say in here what type of entity this thing is. Position or Do I want to put it somewhere else? So right now what we've got is tile production module. Probably the best place to put it again is position sync. Production module is like one of those little tiles on the map that you see inside a spaceship. It's a particular location and facing, and it also has a particular module draw type which specifies what it looks like overall. And these different values in the enumerator, conveyor, conveyor corner, etc., specify what model is going to appear when you try and add into a spaceship. And so I'm thinking I need something that contains this concept of a module draw type. So when we're thinking about what to add to a world, we need to put that somewhere. I might just keep whacking everything into this one class. If later on the component gets overloaded, I can always split it out into more components. But we're still making good progress on this, keeping it in one place. So seems okay. So I need an enumerator for the things that we can make. So if we look in ship link, well, it's not so obvious in ship link, but in Star World link, we made an entity on stream earlier, which had space subscenes, the ship parent and the player puck. So we're going to need those two things. So those are things that one might want to create from one of these entities, subscenes and puck. We also have from here the production module draw type, though that's something we might want to make. So down here I specified the 3D template. So it could be template name or entity or template 3D name. We'll call entity template 3D name because it's essentially what it's going to be. And so it could be that it's a module where we specify a module draw type. So that's how all the modules end up in the ship. It could be that it's a ship or a space object. And so I might just move the space subscenes enumerator back where it was, now that I think about that. Although it's here. As long as it's public, I can import it. So it's going to be what was it I just moved? Space subscenes. So that's now being imported from Bridge Star World link. Space subscenes. So those are two different kinds of things that we might want to make. And for each of the values in these enumerators, we're going to need to have either a scene or a mesh that's going to be loaded. So we need somebody who's going to hold all those scenes and meshes, which will probably be either a resource or a system. Does sound like a resource type thing. I'm just trying to plan that out, because if we start having a resource, then it's going to have the same problem that we had with this other one, which is that we want to share it among multiple worlds. And that's kind of annoying. But it's like, yeah. So this GD entity creation, for now, so I don't think I've even created that class anywhere else. No, so I need to define that structure, or it's not going to compile anyway. So we're defining a new struct called GD entity creation. What does it contain? Well, it contains that hash map I'm going to need of all the entities that one could possibly create. So it looks kind of like that hash map here of subscenes. It's on the right hand side. We'll call it templates 3D. Might just call it templates now. The key is the template 3D name, and the value is the entity 3D template, right? So if we're running and we're reading through all these different things, I'm not sure why this is still red. Let me just have a look at what it's trying to say. That's my problem. If we're reading through all these, so what we want to do here is run through all the spatials and positions, and find the ones that need to be made. So we take the GD spatial, which as you remember is this idea of where it should be. Take the GD spatial. Now we don't want a GD spatial, so I think we put a not sign in front of it if we don't want it, and we put a reference to GD pos, and then we call this routine called .join, and what this should give us is the ability to iterate over all the positions whenever the spatial does not exist. To remind myself if I got this right, I'm going to have a quick look at the specs documentation for Rust. This always tells me the Rust system requirements for the game Rust. It's very annoying. Yeah, moderately annoying. Link to the book. And so in here, I want to have a look at the joining components. And in here, I'm pretty sure it shows how to exclude components. Yes, you use not into reference like that, and it will try not to get it. So if I go not a reference to GD spatial, it's only going to it's only going to return entities that don't have a spatial component yet. Those are the ones that aren't made yet. And of course, this raises a question: what do we do when we want to delete them? We need to do the opposite for deletion. Yeah, that's an interesting problem I have to worry about later. Because if an entity is actually deleted, then it's gone. And the idea of a spatial that it had is gone. How do we find that? So we need to, there's another means of doing that, which I'll probably have to do. Anyway, this will work for creation. So that's good enough for me for now. So for GD pos, and call this GD positions. So the GD position class contains all the information I need to know about where I want this thing to go. But GD pos, nothing in that join. Yeah, that works. What did it import? I don't want editor tools. So now we're ready for the exciting job of actually creating this thing. Here in the helpers, we've got a means of doing that. So this is how one finds a node that exists. Well, let's get or add child. This is the code that we were writing yesterday. So first we need to find a particular spatial. So let's work through this in sequence. So if we're going to add something to a particular ship, First we need to have as the parent of the ship. So let parent equal, we need to use world data dot parent. So world data is this guy that we had up here. He's a fetch GD world parents, and so we should get this. I need to change this name. We should get this guy here, which has parents, so it has a pointer to a mutex to a hash map, right? And so with parent dot, is it lock? We probably don't need to do anything to lock. I'm pretty sure that was the lock mutex thing. Get singleton sector. Yeah, you have to call a function called lock. So lock dot. Now we've got the actual hash map. We're going to try and get one. Get and we want to use gdpos dot world ID, which is, so gdpos is this up here, and we want to get the child world. We might just say world ID. So optionally now we've got the overall parent. If we don't have the overall parent, we kind of should just run away and hide. I'd love to use a question mark here, but we can't. So so let the parent equal if some parent equals this parent, else continue. So this trick will unwrap it. If it exists, it'll unwrap it. If it doesn't, we're going to skip over it. So using the way that the if statement can return values. I need a semicolon here for the let. So now that we know we've got a parent, we need to find the child. So we need to do something similar to get the child. Let. Well, this one isn't a grandparent, I guess you call this. So the ship is the grandparent. Inside the ship, I like to organize the nodes by like floor or, tiles or something similar. So parent equals, there's some, so we'll just change this. Parent equals of some parent. In this case, we're going to use grandparent dot get that returns a spatial, and this one needs to return a child. Hopefully all this pain is the last time that I have to worry about making things, because oh my god, it's so much pain. So we're finding a node. To find the node we need this little set of arguments. I forget what the falses mean. And then we turn it into a spatial. NZ Heals has totally got it on the head. It might be pain, but I love it. And I mean, to tell you the truth, like, part of me just wants to run and hide, but part of me is just like, let's push through. It's going to be so good. It's going to be totally worth it in the end. Whenever I just get over the whole thing, I just need to remember, I just imagine there's this big mothership and this little baby ship full of resources just comes in, slows down. It's just going to be so beautiful when it's working. And then you as a player undock from the little console. I wrote a little story about it. It was so vivid in my mind. I just try and visualize that, and it all feels better. Okay, so that gives us the argument we need, the string. And we lost a closing bracket. What did I put here? I don't need any of that junk anymore. I just need this open brace here. Actually, I did put too many brackets. So, first we get the ship. That's the ship. Inside the ship, we get the parent, which is the thing that I use to organize my nodes. With the parent, I mean, part of me is just really concerned because I'm streaming. I'm really concerned that I'm just boring everyone completely to death with all my really slow coding. If you're doing this in your degree, yeah. This is some serious shit to manage in a university degree. So this one here is getting the ship. This one here is getting my little parent, which is going to be the line 82 is going to be grief as I call lock, but the lock returns a result. Yeah, that's really annoying, isn't it? It's going to complain. Because grandparent is a reference to a spatial. We could just straight up clone grandparent then. We don't even need it for very long. But the reason Togglebit's pointing out that when you lock this, it needs to be put into a variable so that we can still keep it. In fact, there's kind of no point to unlock it between the different positions we're processing. We're going to rattle through these really fast. We don't need to make new parents. So we might as well just say parents.get. Like this. So let parents equal world_data.parent.lock. I'm also wondering if we want to like nest these structures somehow. So world data is the one that's shared inside a mutex, and then this hash map. We'll get to that if we come to it, but we might end up with lots of different data that's inside of this arc mutex pattern that we want to share between all the worlds. 2 games in your degree on being in VR and 1 being a board game. That's pretty serious. That's some pretty serious coding right there. Sorry if the bed scratching is too loud on microphone. Okay. So thanks for saving me a compile issue there. VR coding seems like it would be a lot of fun, but I guess all the 3D work and worrying about performance and then testing it, motion sickness. It seems like a really fun place to be, but I'll take your word for it. It's probably one of several things that just sounds really great and in reality is really painful. Okay, so we got the grandparent, got the parent at this point. Now we're ready to make the node. I'm sorry it crashed all the time. Yeah. It's a real pity. Get packed instance. I'm just trying to remember how to what does get packed do? Oh, that's right, that was the routine that we set up ourselves. It makes some sense. Spatial. Okay, so what we need here is a line that's going to be a get the template. I think we put this inside GD entity creation. Yeah, so that's actually a member, one of our members here. So we've got self, so we can call self. So to make the scene, let template equal. So match self.templates, and there's going to be several options. You're so different from me, NZ Heels. You like the documentation and the paperwork. You'd fit well in many programming teams because most programmers hate those parts. If templates is, if we couldn't find it, then we're going to just continue. If we could, so what we're creating here is new spatial, which is going to be placed inside a parent. So the new spatial we created is either going to be a sum, and it's going to be a scene, like so. And here I'm going to write the type in, which is entity 3D type template scene. So this is how we create a scene. And the other thing we could create possibly is a mesh. So remember, just above here, we wrote that we could have a mesh. So it's possible we're going to create a mesh here. So in the case of a scene, in order to turn a scene into a spatial, we need to call this routine that I created earlier called instance scene, like so. And it returns a spatial scene, and if it fails to cast the scene to a spatial, or the scene is bad, I think it can take an option as a scene. It's going to fail, basically. So let's bring this in. It's going to return none. Cool, I'm glad I'm managing to make it interesting in Z-Heels. I'm trying to keep my explanations like... Oh, there's a missing pattern. What about pattern I missed? Trying to keep my explanations like really clear. I thought I'd finished... So in Rust, it's if you make a match statement, it actually will complain if you've forgotten one possible thing that you might be matching. I did actually get all of them, that's good. So, self templates... Oh, I need to call .get, and what I'm trying to get is based on, once again we're going to use gdpos. We're going to ask it what the template is. So gdpos we defined up here, remember? And no, I didn't actually put it in. Okay, so I want to put it in now. So you need to specify a template that you want created for this particular thing. So whenever I create an entity, I create a GD position sync, I specify a template for it, a string for its name in Godot, a string for its parent that's going to contain it as a node, and the world it's going to be in. Well, in Z-Heels, I'm trying to explain it at a level I think is interesting and will target most people without boring experts. So someone who's good at programming, I'm hoping, is going to just say, oh yeah, Tom's just saving the trouble of reading it myself. That, I can just kind of tune out slightly. And anybody who doesn't know programming is going, well, they'll probably be overwhelmed by how much programming dives deep into the detail. But they should be able to pick up some stuff. But I can't explain it at a completely basic level because it would just become really boring to most people that understand programming if I explain every little thing all the time. So hopefully I've explained it at enough of a level that you're having fun and then it's a success. Spatial. So this code I put down here I think was just a reminder to myself what I was going to do next. That might fail. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to structure all of this code as something called an and then. So if we don't get the template, we won't execute this match. So with the template, we're going to match that. And that's what all this code below is. So with the template, match the template, and I'll move this code inside of here. So we try and find the template inside this dictionary. If we find it, we call this routine. If we don't find it, we drop through. If this routine returns, this routine can also return options. And I'll be treated the same way in the control flow as if the scene wasn't found. It's one of those things where I wonder if I want to have results Yeah, that's a good reason not to do this, because if I ever want to change this to return results, it'll be easier if I haven't done this. Okay. So we want to instance the scene. There's also the one we want to instance a mesh. In mesh placer, we call something called instance tile. Create a new mesh instance and set the mesh as its mesh, like so. This, and then cast it to a spatial, like that. Mesh. So those are the two different things that we might want to make. This one here is a scene, which contains like lots of nodes. This one here is a single mesh, which is really simple. So we create a node called a mesh instance to hold the mesh, put the mesh in it, and then downcast the mesh, which is also a spatial because it's like a child class. Downcast it back to a spatial, and then it drops out of here back to the new spatial here. So if let sum equals new, so there's if this if statement hits, we've now got a spatial we can put in the scene. So we need to set its name, and the name we want to set is this child name that we've got inside of world data, not world data, inside of GDPOS. So we've chosen the name for this node here, child name. We chose a name for the parent there, parent name. I don't actually create the parent here. It would make sense that if we can't find the parent, instead of continuing, we create a parent. It's not a problem just yet, but I should probably consider doing that. Here we've got a spatial, we're making the spatial, it's a node. If we've got the spatial, we're going to give it the name we specified for the child. And the next thing we're going to do is add it to the parent we looked up in this map up here. So remember grandparent? So we know that parent is inside grandparent. We need to make sure that we add a child to parent. So just like in here, we add a child here. So we need to downcast to a node to do that. Oh, well that's a good reason to change this from instance scene spatial to instance scene node. Yeah, we'll do that. So this isn't a new spatial, this is just a new node. So we actually support in this routine is now going to support for entity creation any node, not just spatial ones. So there are some nodes that are like 2D and stuff. Those ones will not be spatials. But I won't be dealing with those anyway. So we're setting the name of our new node to equal the one that was in the data structure. Togglebit is pointing out that we might fail to lock the mutex. If we can't lock the parent mutex, then we're kind of stuck. We'll have to bail. Yeah. Oh well, I'll see what the compiler has to say about this, and I'll come up with a solution for it at the time. What just happened there? Okay. Have some water. So if you're just joining us, I'm trying to create the most generic mapping I can between specs, which is an entity component system, and Godot. trying to make like some little generic pieces of code that can do things like create stuff in my scene, move them, that sort of stuff, in the hopes that they'll be the last pieces of code I have to write to do those kind of tasks. Because right now I'm hacking them up one at a time for each different purpose, and it's slowing me down a lot. And this is kind of the point of using an ECS. I hadn't even considered writing these bindings until today. But this code is so difficult to write, I have to try and think things through. It takes a long time. The parent's adding a new child, new node. Okay, so this spatial this node should now be in the right place. So there's lots of other edge cases we have to worry about. We need to worry about deleting nodes and moving them between places. God, that was so hard. I don't relish the idea of moving them and stuff. Just thinking about this code as well. Like, that's like we could write a pretty straightforward helper function to do this. Like find parent and grandparent. We could even say and then. The advantage of this approach is we can make a nice result. If we cared about creating nice results for our errors, then this would be a really great structure, because we could put one error here saying can't find the grandparent, or don't know about that world. Another error here saying the parent node's not there, or create it. Down here the error is that we don't know how to make a particular template that was mentioned. It hasn't been loaded. Down here is another loading error, basically. We could manage each of those. Anyway, that's GD entity creation. So let's just make a submodule for this. So a quick way of doing that in C-Line is to go up here, say there's a mod. The module is going to be entity create, create, and it will create a new file with the right name, and it'll put it in the right place. The right place is next to the mod file here. And then inside the entity create, I'm going to put the GD Spatial that we're going to use. We haven't used that yet, actually. I should have already used that. Entity 3D template. We'll leave that in mod for now. This world data will need entity creation as the system that we're talking about. So we'll move all this. Okay, so the part that I just realized I'd missed, and there's a lot of these includes that I haven't pulled across. Let's just build them real quick by just using the C-Line. It's doing a lot of the work for me. If I don't, I'm getting annoyed doing that. I'll just paste this big block in and delete the stuff I don't need. Though that's probably going to be just as painful. Oh well. Oh boy, oh boy. This stuff needs to be imported from the parent. This as well. Okay, so that's the code in its own file now, which is nice. The last thing we need to do in this run function is, if everything goes well, I actually wanted to create, see there's a missing value here for GD Spatial. I want to actually create that so that we can track that there is now actually a spatial in the right place that we want to use. So to do that, I'm going to need an entity here. And I'm going to need to say that I want to track entity. And I'll need to change my system so that it has entity, like so, and decode it here. And then I need to import this name. And down here, that's everything. Do I need to say that it's entities A? Now this entity, it tracks which things are alive in specs, and it's required for this class here is actually like connecting together all the different components. You could think of it as a really fancy integer, which is an index into all the arrays which contain components. That's a very basic version of it. And so with the benefit of that entity class, we're able to say GD Spatial, could call it GD Spatials, not just one. So the point of this exercise is we're only going to create nodes that don't exist, but now we've created one, we want to insert information that has been created. Well, it's going to get created every frame, and also we won't be able to reuse it later this frame in other systems. So we want to insert a new instance of GD Spatial, and it needs two things. It needs a current child world and a spatial. So, and now that I think about it, the GD Spatial is only true for so this entity creation, I changed this down to creating a node, but I really do want a spatial, so I'm just going to change it back to making a spatial, not a node. So I lied and deceived you all. But here we have to use cast to change it to the right type. There was an example here. I had to use .cast because Godot, the Godot Rust bindings are basically simulating subclassing, which isn't really something you see in Rust, and they simulate it using this cast function like this. Add child. Need to cast it to be a node so that it has the right type. And having added that node as a child, I can now insert a GD Spatial instance. So spatial is equal to this. In fact, I don't even call it new node at this point. And the current child world is specified in the pos. So we used it up here. So having used it to find a grandparent, we can now safely claim that this node exists within the grandparent rather than some other place. And why is that complaining? Okay, I think we need to say false. Oh, that's right, we had to say the entity name. So this is where we put the entity in. The entity is like a key into this insert function. It's like inserting into a dictionary, which is why we needed entity in the first place. Okay, that's how we create a node. Now let's try moving one. So go back to mod, going to add a new module. Like so, add. So the entity move module was here. And like this one, it has all these users in it. I bet half of those aren't necessary. It's going to be a nuisance to delete them all. Whatever. We need to make a new. It's also going to use GD Spatial. So in fact, I probably should put those back in that class back in the root. Now that I think about it. I wonder if I ever implemented a component for GD Spatial. I probably didn't. And the type of storage you choose based on how many of them you expect to be in the scene. You're basically choosing your runtime cost. So a vex storage is very dense, it has lots of them, close together. It's nice and performant, but it only works well if almost every entity has one, which is going to be true for these. So it's good. This shouldn't be called a walkable here. It should be called a GD position sync now, because I'm repurposing that component for this purpose. Entity move. So entity move looks in some ways like GD entity creation. Let's just copy this. Should be a lot simpler, because in this case we're going to only move ones that already exist. We already have a spatial reference. Getting the spatial reference was the most painful thing from the previous one. I don't think we're going to need entities. We need a read storage to the spatial, unless it counts as modifying the spatial when you move it. I can't remember if that does. We don't need to be able to fetch the world data, so as you can see, it's a lot simpler. We've got spatials, we've got positions, we don't need world data. Import this. So given a position and a spatial in the list of positions and the list of spatials, so this says we go through all the components where both those things exist. If they both exist, then we're going to loop here. Don't need any of that code. So now we're going to just take some inspiration from the existing code we used to move things around, because it's basically the same. So move bipeds. All we need is this block of code I've just selected there. So we need to calculate the transform, which is straightforward enough. Lucid. Need to create an angle. It's just import all the things. Okay. So my rotation here is specified using an axis and a rotation, but I want to use actually from Euler. I wonder if there's a way of creating this transform directly from. The other option is to create a quaternion from Euler and then pass the quaternion's stats in. The other option is to restrict the rotation to only around the y-axis, which won't work for ships because they move a bit. It probably won't work for a lot of stuff I'm doing later. So we need to do the full code with the quaternion here. I'm just checking out the Discord. Need to do the full quaternion, which allows the full rotation, unless there's a routine which can allow me to pass in Euler angles and transform 3D, which I think is unlikely. Let's just see if I can find a browser that I can purloin in order to look at this documentation. It's not Euler, it's Lucid. Don't tell me docs.rs is down. That's a problem. I mean, my stream's still healthy, right? That's not great. Okay. Let's have a look at the source code. Well, minifying that didn't help. So here's the froms we have. It's not very many. What was the name of the other function? It's called create rotation. So it's got transform, scale, rotation, skew, perspective. So rotation has to always be done by using an axis and an angle. Okay, so it looks like if we want to do Euler angles, we're going to have to create a quaternion and then use its calculations to generate this rotation. This is very similar to the ship sinking code, which came with the quaternion right from the start. So right down here, we had this rotation axis that came straight from physics. So rotation was a quaternion here. So I created this. Ooh, cargo dock to generate local docks. That's pretty sexy. I never tried that before. Let's try that. Probably could launch it directly from this, but we'll see. Oh no, I've shown you my version of Windows. Anyway, that's pretty cool. So that's grinding away over here. I'll just pop it over here for now. My fans have all turned on. Let me show you this code for managing quaternions that I whipped up earlier. Yahaha. Blap. So if we've got a rotation, so we're going to say let rotation equal it's the same as this rotation here, which was a quaternion of some kind, like a unit quaternion. It's not helping me very much. Oh, of course, this, no, that still won't help me. So you see this piece of code here is exactly what I want to write. So the rotation equals a unit quaternion from Euler angles. The Euler angles come from GD pos. Failed to run custom build command, which isn't really that surprising because reasons. I don't want to solve those on screen. But suffice to say, GD Native doesn't like using all the build tools I have on my computer. I have to choose. It's going back to trying to build again. It's going to fail another time. I'm trying the open thing to see if that works. Does it open what it manages to build? No. So yeah, libclang on my computer is not... Well, there are reasons. I can't be bothered typing that in right now. It's distracting. I really appreciate you pointing that out. That could be really useful to know about and run locally down the track. So thank you. I'm learning. Like, I thought I was supposed to be teaching, but I'm learning a lot from the chat box. So all the people over there, thank you very much for giving me good ideas. By the way, you're welcome to talk over there, even if you're not as fancy as these people. And you can be like, Rust, what is Rust? And someone will fill you in. Or what is Godot? I'm sure these guys can tell you the answers to those questions. Feel free to say hello in the chat box. Rotation. So this is a unit quaternion. It's like this fancy, hello word constructor. I've never heard of you before. He's like our most active user, so like I really appreciate him saying hello. So hello word constructor, it's nice to see you. Although NZ Heals and Toggle, you guys have been really active today. It's been very nice. Thank you very much. Okay. I like how you guys always use like a bearded guy in your emoticons. No idea why you do that. I trimmed this today. It's like I already miss my old beard. I don't know why I trimmed it. It was a bad idea. I regret it. Anyway, take the quaternion, find its axis, here's its angle, here's its translation. If it didn't actually have a rotation, then we just make a matrix out of just the translation, which is like, so, you know, you got a spaceship, you turn it, and then you move it to the correct place on this in the 3D world. That's what the transform's doing. First that and that. You don't want to move it and then rotate it, because you end up by moving it and then it rotates like this to the wrong place. So you need to rotate it in place and then move it. And this is like the whole. I feel like to try and do that. Anyway, you and your emoticons. Nice one. That's a good plan, NZ Heels. A good plan. So then we've got a transform we're going to put on the spatial. Job done. And this isn't GD entity creation anymore, it's GD entity translation or transform. So this just moves, this just takes the existing you're having too much fun down in the chats, guys. Too many cool emoticons. I love it. It's so great. Anyway, those are our two systems. So now we should be able to create something and move it around the scene. Which could be really cool. Okay, mod. I'm sorry, it was just me trying to read all these crazy little emoticons. It's just tiny down on my screen. Some of those things with like people getting eaten by tentacles, that does actually like relate to how I'm really feeling. If you can imagine, like trying to get myself to grips with this code. So, you know, it's all relevant to today's society and all that stuff. Okay. So let's see, update star world. So to update well, actually I don't really want to put those in here as methods. Okay. So you got world data, entity, okay, we made a good start. Let's just quickly stage everything I've done so far. So Git's kind of half saving them. Yeah, I agree. Preparing your CV is legit terrifying. You know, not only like what people are going to think of me and like, what do I say, what don't I say? Oh my God, you know, you start feeling a bit like lack of self-confidence. It's all going to be okay in the end. Just try and speak to what the employer is actually looking for. You know, they're looking for responsibility, looking for some experience, they're looking for enthusiasm, this sort of thing. And you'll be fine. That's my opinion anyway. Components, mods. The next thing to do is to start thinking about how we're going to create this GD position sync entity from the Rust entities that we've had in the past. So we're going to have to create essentially a system for each type of thing that needs to be translated across to having a GD position sync. These systems are probably quite lightweight, but they still do exist. So Oh yeah, that's right, NZ Heals. Yeah. Good luck with your application. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what else to add to that. I mean, you're already a huge step ahead because you've got the New Zealand residency all sorted. So that's the problem with a company like in New Zealand. Getting someone as a resident is actually one of the hardest parts. So if you've got that sorted out, then that makes their life a lot easier. And it's about how well you know the game, which I'm sure you've got down. I mean, you just practice the game, yeah. No, interact with people probably is also a big part, like people skills. Let's see, new. Right, well, I'm not going to do a new Rust file that way. I'm just trying to figure out how to make a file that, I want to make something that's going to turn our ships into one of these position sync things. Because we can start with that. And another one which is players. So maybe we'll call it player sync mod. Player sync mod ship sync. So these are simple systems that just modify and create the relevant entities. Just trying to think if there's a modify and create type method I could use. Yeah. Ship sync. Thanks for the suggestion to start focusing. I need that. That's totally solved all my problems. Call this GD ship sync. So this is a system whose job it is. So remember how we created a way of saying this is where the thing's going to be. This is its parent name and its child name and its template and its actual position in 3D. Well, we need something that's going to actually track and control those. So I've got let's create a third window here. So I'm going to show you a ship now. Spaceship. I got a space. Anyway. So this spaceship has a particular location, X and Z location, and a facing. I think we actually ignored those and ended up using a pos, which is a 3D position. So anyway, the GD ship sync is a system which takes as read storage. Let's have a quick look at this code that already exists in where does it exist? GD ship world or Star World link. There we are. So in GD Star World link, we got this code that moves ships, and it reads ships in positions, and then it iterates through those. And for each one, it moves the ships. But in our new system, what we do is we read the spaceship and the position, and we don't actually move anything per se. We translate those into into a position sync, which is that entity that specified where things were. So it might sound like it's like another level of so-called indirection. It's like, you know, you go here, then go there. And it sounds a bit crazy, but it won't cost much, and it will make life a little bit easier, and we can hopefully crank out these little sync things much faster than cranking out the whole code before. So the system data needs to be able to read spaceships. It needs to be able to read positions. It's going to need entities, because we're going to be adding. If you're adding stuff, you need an entity. And this is a Okay, this indenting's messed up. There we go. So we need to access entities, we need to access spaceships, we need to access positions. It's complaining that I haven't put a lifetime argument here or here. And we need a GD position sync, which we're going to be writing to. That's the whole point of the system, is to read those two and turn it into a GD position sync. I'll put this back over here now. Okay. So what arguments are we taking? We're taking entity. We're taking ships. We're taking positions. And we're taking GD pos sync. Let's have a look at the name I gave entity move. I want to make sure I use the same name in both these things. GD positions. Great. Okay. So for each ship and position, and we're going to also trait the entity. So each entity, ship and position, and entities, ships and positions dot join. So what we want is something which will allow me to get, and I wonder if docs.rs is coming up yet. No. Okay. So what I want to search for is in write storage. It's probably just in storage. Let's go look at this class. No. I'm trying to find its use in There we go, this is storage I was looking for. So we've got get count as empty contains because what I want to do is get, I essentially want to get this component, and if it doesn't exist, I immediately want to create it. So I was wondering if there's going to be a nice way to do that. Hash maps have this concept called entries for that. We don't seem to use it though. Yeah. This seems to be okay, so there's an entry argument here which will let me do this. Wow. We can actually use it in join as well. So we don't even need entity. That's really handy. Okay, so what we can do is we can say we want the ship pos and we want the GD pos in ships positions, GD positions, and for the GD pos as shown here we can say dot entries. Sorry, I'm putting the dot entries in the wrong place. I put the dot entries over here. and I no longer need the ampersand to grab the location of this. And now with GDPOS, I can say or insert with. So GDPOS equals GPOS fetch. I might call this fetch, yeah. Or entry, or insert. Basically, is actually what this code is. That flickering thing is somewhat annoying. And so with that magic, we now have access to a GDPOS that might have the default values, and is completely ready to populate. We don't know what the global world ID should be. If it's a spaceship, the global world ID is always going to be zero. Is always going to be 0. So that part is easy. So GDPOS dot world ID equals 0 is equals global world ID space world ID, which I believe is 0. GDPOS dot parent name. I believe I said that was going to be ships. GDPOS dot child name equals format, and it's ship. This is from GD Star World link. Move ships. We specify its name somewhere in here. Get ship spatial. Yeah, it's lowercase ship, and we use ship ID dot 0. It's basically this. And to get the ship ID, we look at ships dot ship ID. Okay, then the template. So GDPOS dot template is always going to be an entity 3D template ship, etc. Space object. So it's going to be a space object in space. Ship parent. So now we know the template. And then we need to go through each of these different values. And populate it. We're moving it across from the game logic, and we're moving it into the Godot object that we're going to synchronize. So xlock. So let's just It's kind of a pity to rotate it, to turn it into quaternion, take it from quaternion, turn it into Euler, turn it back into a quaternion again. It's just bothering me that I'm doing this translation twice, because when we bring stuff across from physics, it's already in the right. See, all this is redundant because in a lot of our entities we already have a pos, and that pos as specified was to move a ship. It's pretty detailed. I'm starting to think that this is redundant now. I'm going to just declare that as redundant and say I'm not going to track X lock and Y lock and stuff in this component, because there's a different component we already have that is tracking those things. It's this one here called pos. So we don't even need to copy all the values about where it is in space, but we do need to go back into the entity move code and change this so it's getting it from the actual pos. So we need to get pos here. This is no longer even a position sync. I had to give it a different name. So it's spatial settings or something. Scene tree location. Yeah. Scene tree stats. Or just GD scene tree. GD scene location, yeah. GD scene lock. So we don't need a GD scene lock. We need a pos. So this takes a GD spatial, a GD and a pos. So it takes a GD spatial into pos. Takes spatials and positions. So as I go through this design, things are starting to fall into place, become more pure. So you have to bear with me as I figure this out. So creating a general way that, let me just show you what pos looks like. It's just an isometry 3, it's a transform. It has, it's a struct that I use for the physics. And as an isometry 3, it has a unit quaternion, and essentially a vector. A translation is just a vector, right? So it's got a vector and a quaternion. So a vector is 3 ints and a quaternion is 4, and the vector the translation specifies where, and the quaternion specifies rotation. So that's what a pos is, and so it already has all the information we need to put something in 3D in the right place. So it seemed kind of redundant to do it again by creating all these. So we're not going to do that. So then I can go back to GD Star World link. This is how I used to move spaceships, move ships. I got the translation and the rotation directly out of the pos like that. And we move it like so. So ship sync is quite simple. I also need things like module sync and player sync. So if we have a look in GD ship link here, and we go down a bit, we load some scenes, and in process, when we add a module, here we are. Because it's just we get the module. We create its scene. We set its name here. Add it as a child. Yeah, it's named based on its X and Y location. Anyway, so we've got ship sync, we've got player sync. I'm going to add another one here, which is module sync, which is the modules are little buildings that you see inside the spaceships. So we're going to try and place them in the spaceships just by creating the right Godot components. So I'm doing a lot of groundwork here, and then suddenly, hopefully, everything will compile after about half an hour of pain, and then it'll all somewhat work. Lots of things will break at once. I'm just gonna do it all at once. It seems easier in my mind than showing you steps as we go along. I hope you'll bear with me. Okay. If you really desperately want me to just show you something, you should probably mention it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to just keep on plucking away this way. Ship link. Where was I? Oh yes, it's going to go to mod, and in here, ship sync, module sync. And I can click on this and create a module sync.rs file. Add. And the module sync.rs file is going to keep copying the same block of blah blahs that we're using again and again. It's kind of similar to the ship sync, I guess. In this case, we don't even need this pause. So we got the ship location, GD positions entry, GD pause entry, GD pause. We got position. Do we even need position? I don't think we do, because that stays unchanged directly from, so we don't even need position. Spaceship. Does that get used? It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, so when it runs, it probably doesn't need entities anymore, but I'm not going to remove that just yet. Positions. Great. So that's how you synchronize a ship. So over here for we're going to try synchronizing a module. So GD module sync. This code is going to be run within a particular world already. How to say this? My entity create function here took a world ID. What do we do if our grandparents always the same world, like all the tiles of a ship? I'm not completely sure. I'm sure I'll figure that out later on. Module sync. I mean, what's kind of hinted at in terms of, well, I was going to say I could hold a spatial or hold a world in the entity, but that doesn't make a great deal of sense. Just like thinking of using an enumerator. There's some detail here that's just too hard to explain really quickly if you haven't been watching for a long time, because there's lots of specs worlds here. So yeah, I'm just going to just skim over this. Okay, GD module sync takes a read storage, which is a production module. So let me show you what a production module looks like. Has a location in X and Y, has it facing, which direction is it? A draw type, what does it look like? We're going to copy those across to the relevant generic things that I've created just a little bit earlier. So we're going to read through the production modules. we're going to write positions, we're going to write scene locations. That's all. I don't think we need entities. So now I just need to list the same things as I put up here and give each one of them names. So this one is going to be I just call it module, don't I? What do I normally call these things when I'm dealing with a production module? And build module, I just usually call them, that's a module string. And build and add module, I call it just new module. Okay, so I'll just use the word module to describe a module, a production module. So it's like a piece of conveyor or a little box or something along those lines. Ship sync, player sync, module sync. That's what I'm interested in. Close others. Close others. So run takes modules, positions, and GD scene locks. So for module, we might not have a pos, so it's a pos entry, and we might not have a GD pos in ships, so this is modules. So in this list of modules, we'll see to mutable. Okay, so what this function is going to do is it's going to take production modules, which is like a really simple little component that's created in my simulation, and it's going to create this idea of a position in 3D. So if you look at production floor one more time, no, wrong one. Production module one more time, and there's a location in 2D, X and Y. And so normally I've in the past I've written a really complicated piece of code that interacts directly with Godot, but here what we're going to do is we're going to actually transform the data that's on screen here, this data, and we're going to transform it into a 3D position just in memory, and then we're going to run some generic code that blitzes through that and copies it all to Godot, you know, which we were writing earlier in the stream. So the translation is what I'm making. So the location is going to be this pos entry, and the information about where a node should be created, if it needs to be created, is this one here, GD pos entry. That was just a quick intro if you've been missing out. I'm thinking that this world ID needs to be an optional one somehow, or something along those lines. It's like a vague concept in my head, and it's a bit complicated to explain. So I'm going to just make it optional, and then later on when you're watching it will make more sense. So things that are in space, you have to say which world they belong to. If we want to pair them in a different world, like a spaceship, things inside a spaceship already, lots of them are going to just be in the spaceship that we're currently processing. So it seems kind of silly to have anything other than none here. But in the case of ship sync, well, you know, make this say some. Strictly speaking, now that could be none as well. The only thing that needs a changing world ID is the player, or things that like move from one ship to another but are controlled by, so any vehicles basically that move inside ships. Yeah. So I might as well just say none here as well, if that's going to be the convention we're using. Parent name. So if I go into the into the GD ship link. We are building modules. I put these tiles inside something. Do I just put them directly inside the root? I thought I put them inside like floor or something like that. Or maybe I put this, I think I put this script inside a node called floor. Yeah. Well, we'll just say the parent name is modules, which is new. We didn't use a modules parent before, so that might not work. I need to make sure that that's actually created in Godot, because I'm not sure if that exists, and if it doesn't exist, it might not work. Our name for the node that we're creating in Godot is this tile name, and our template is not a space object. It's going to be did I use the wrong name? This template 3D name I needed here. It's not a space object. It's a module, and the module we can get from modules.draw type, I believe. So you look in production module, it's this draw type that I want. So this is all the information I need to create a new spatial inside of my scene. It's going in the same world as the modules from, which is going to be inside the spaceship. It's going to go in a parent called modules. It itself is going to be a node called tile X and Y, their locations, wherever they happen to be. So it's named based on its position. And I could specify here its draw type. So I might as well do that as well. You're only quite a long string. Problem with that is that if you change the type of a module later, well, does it matter? Doesn't really matter. So that's the things we want to be true in Godot, and then as well as that, we need to also specify where it exists in the world. So this isn't really GD anymore. It was called something else. It was called scene lock. So GD, call this scene entry. We'll rename this GD scene. And then down here we've got GD pos. We'll just call this pos. It's going to be the location in 3D space. So we take pos entry, or insert with default. And in this case we got it's translation and the rotation that we want to modify here. So if I have a look at the code to synchronize with physics, this was an example of me trying to modify such a thing. pos.0.rotation, pos.0.translation dot something. That sort of carry on is the kind of code I need to write. Like so. So we need to figure out the facing angle. So we've already got a facing angle in degrees here. So we can ask the module, so this is which way it's facing, left, right, up or down. We can pass the facing angle into this from Euler angles function. I believe I'm going to have to say angle from what is degrees, like so. I'm not sure if that's correct, but it'll do well enough. So then we have to set up the translation positions. So we've got X, Y, and Z. So in my world, X is in units, so the grid is exactly 1 unit each. So as we move across the x-axis one module at a time, we just move 1 unit on the x-axis as well. So if we had a look at ship link, when a module updates, we have this apply transform. We just need to get an F32 from like this. That might be the way of doing it actually. So these are the how we get the numbers for the transform locations. Like so. If you hold down Alt, you can do a square select region like I just did in many editors rather than holding down Shift, and it allows you to grab like columns of stuff, and sometimes you can do typing as well in multiple columns depending on your editor. So that's useful to try. That's Alt select. So I think it's everything required to calculate where the module should be in a spaceship. What now? The next one was to figure out where a player should be. So we've done the spaceship itself, we've done the tiles inside the spaceship. Now let's just think about how we would do the SG core components, player sync. How we do the player synchronization. So it probably again looks a lot like the module synchronization. So let's copy that, player synchronization, and have a look as inspiration on the Star World link. So, I mean, the whole reason, the whole justification for this effort to move to using the ECS to control Godot is hopefully faster iteration times, faster speed of like progressing through the project. I shouldn't have to write custom code for every different thing I'm going to add down the track. Anyway, so the player sync. So I had this entered this thing called bipeds. Read storage bipeds. So this isn't really player sync so much as biped sync. And I'll name this biped sync GD. BGD biped sync. Which of course is the place you go when you want to wash your bipeds. You always wash them in a biped sink. That's just how it's done, folks. Okay, so given a biped, we can create a position and a scene location, very much like modules. So the name I gave these things was I called them a player park. And to name them, I use entity ID. So I guess I'm going to, strictly speaking, I shouldn't be naming them based on entity ID. I should probably be naming them based on something else, like the player controlling it, or something like that. It's like a little person, this player puck. It doesn't animate right now, it just kind of slides across the floor. In order to preserve the naming I've got here, with an entity ID. Yeah, I can't be bothered. I'm just going to have no name. It's just always player puck. That's okay. Or we'll call it bipeds. So this parent name is a scene tree name that they're all going to go into. The world ID is some, and it matches the one that's provided in the puck. So when we're running, this is a biped here. It's got a position in the scene lock. So these three arguments correspond with the three arguments counting down in specs for our system. And then we're going to iterate through them. So the first one again is going to be a biped. And then we're going to get the scene. The world ID is going to be biped.worldID. So if I look over here, the biped class has a child world. That's the one I want. Child name is player puck. Template is always going to be of space object, and in here I think I made a space subscenes player puck, like so. Pardon me. The position or insert with is here. The facing angle is this one here in degrees, so it's going to be biped dot facing like so, and we need to change it to an F32 from this, because it was a fixed 64 before, which is like an integer that doesn't move where the fractional bit is. X lock and Z lock. Here they are. Oh, I forgot to put a Z there. That's going to mess up my module synchronization too, so I'll just put a Z there. That's everything to move the biped around. Okay, so we could try and make this all compile. The code that I've just written isn't being used yet, so I'm not calling these systems yet from anywhere, so they won't get applied. And I haven't removed the old code that used to do the synchronization. So let's just walk through and make everything compile, and I'll quickly show you how it looks before I break it all and make it not the word key. Let's just rearrange this a bit so that you can see. We'll close all of these, close all in group, and open this one. Okay. So it hasn't declared that Godot string isn't imported. Godot string is probably from some sort of prelude thing. Probably just use Godot star. Just like I probably used specs prelude star. It's got this problem with GD Spatial. Mesh instance. So again, let's compile it again. So can't figure out transform. I think we call it transform 3D. Transform is from Godot. Let us see. Where do we find the imported transform? I used transform also in all the space stuff. So Star World Link, for instance, uses transform. Yeah. There it is, a new slid. Why does it work in Star World Link and not in the other? Yeah. Okay, I had actually fixed that with the Godot star import, I just didn't notice. Just whipping through here, adding some more imports. Cannot find value parent in the scope. If some parent equals grandparent, I probably misspelt it here. Where have I used a unit quaternion before? I see this is the code I need. I need to put this in algebra code in the module that can't find a unit quaternion here. So much 3D maths libraries. I'm really glad someone else is writing those for once. Writing those things for each project gets really tedious. And one thing I like about Rust is how easy it is to just pull in other people's projects using cargo, so we can just use someone else's algebra, use someone else's physics, someone else's networking library, somewhat, etc. It's really great. Really, it's really great. I'm getting tired, so I'm getting a bit flat. Using undeclared type or module out in algebra. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that we're using that in our cargo files. So I use in algebra 18.1 at the moment. I don't know if that's up to date. It seems unlikely that it's up to date, but I need to make sure I use the same version in my simulation, in my core one. So SG core cargo.toml needs it here as well. Oh, I probably need to put it in the lib. Do I? I probably just didn't put the import in. Yeah. GD walkable doesn't exist anymore. So maybe I'll remove this code here for move bipeds, because this is all changed and I broke it, basically. And it's also redundant, I don't need it anymore. I call this entities up here. Cannot find value grandparent in the scope. I need to say let, and I need to put a let down here as well for this trick to work, because I'm doing unpacking. Sorry about the really boring compile issues. New node in the scope. I don't call it new node, I call it spatial. Cannot find world data. How did we do this before? I used to pass this, I think I decided I don't need that here, do I? Because I'm just doing transforms. Just a bit of old vestigial code from copy pasting. Cannot find modules in the scope. Yeah, it's bipeds. Rename that. Cannot find GD positions in scope. I call it just positions now, because it is just positions. Oh, GD scene lock. Cannot find module. I call it biped. Biped. Cannot find G. We're getting... Oh my god, don't think too much about it. There's a lot of unused imports because of the way I did that. Probably need... I wish there was a quick way to clean those up. Cannot find type GT sync ship sync. It's module ship sync in this file. GT positions should be scene location. Cannot find spatial. That's the Godot one. Cannot find GT walkable. Let's get rid of this. Don't even use it anymore. Cannot find packed scene. Yeah, we can recompile. Cannot find value world. For some reason it was renamed. Let's run this again. World is ambiguous. This is a specs world. This is also a specs world. The trait copy may not be implemented for this type. Okay, why? Because strings can't be copied. That's all good. And for that type, nope, I don't want to copy that either. GD entity creation uses entities. How does it use entity? Because we insert a spatial using entity. Let me just think on that for a moment. I can't remember if we got entities res here or not. Like so. Okay, entities res doesn't need an A, apparently. Oh, I keep forgetting how to do this entities thing and I keep getting it wrong. So annoying. So this entities object is going to allow us to get access to an entity, which is like an integer index into the components array, so I can add a component. So I want to be able to add this component here into the GD spatials array. So I need an entity, but yeah. Reminding myself what an entities is. It really is just called entities. So despite all the bitching and moaning over here, it really should be called entities here. So there's probably something else I've missed. Oh, it was GD world data. We didn't want to. I see we can't use fetch. We do need to use read. I thought we did. But then something else is wrong. So what do I use instead of... I can't remember what we use for fetches now. Do we use read? That's how we read a module map. Is it just that we're using the old version of specs or something? Or do we just not need a lifetime specifier? Is that all there is to it? I see, so something else is importing this read, because it's specs read we want. Yes, now we need an A again. So something else is trying to import a read I didn't realize. And it's messing us up. Okay, so the next problem is that we've got the nodes can't be sent between threads safely. Because it appears within the type SG Spatial. So if it can't be sent between threads safely, it can't go in this component apparently. Do be a good way to wrap that, I imagine. But I'm not sure what that is. That's very annoying because it was going to make life a lot easier being able to manage that. Okay, so it's the arc mutex that's causing this problem. This mutex is meaning that class has to implement send and probably sync as well. I'm probably going way overboard with those. You don't even need that. We just need a mutable box. I've forgotten what that's called right now. There's an obvious, a class you use all the time for that. I don't need anything threadable. What do you use for a mutable reference inside something? Is it like it's not RC, but you do use RC and then you use something else. I'm waiting for someone to help me out here. One of you guys. I'm looking at you. You behind the camera. You open up the chat window. Quick, type in the answer. What do you put inside of an RC so that you can make it mutable? It's like a box type thing, but it's just the name of it escapes me right now. I haven't used it for so long. Not a mutex. No, it's something that you use on a single thread and it will blow up in your face if you try and use it. Well, another thread is already using it, and it will cause a panic. Arc mutex. That's the multi-threaded way to do it. There's a single-threaded way to do it. That's like a box. Thanks for your help, Weak Instructor. I might have a look in the book. I'm sure the book will tell me. Cell. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. It's just called a cell. Excellent. So what we want is to downgrade from an arc mutex to an RC cell. And that has the advantage of not being multi-threaded. Cancel. I've seemed to have got a Who Watches the Watchers achievement just now, so And I wonder if that means someone followed me. So if you followed me just now, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And while you're at it, check out Discord and Twitter. They're worth following as well. If you like talking about game development, if you want to feel inspired to do your own game development, please drop on our Discord. Here's our Twitter account. And let's see if I can find that Discord link for you. Copy link. View image, copy link location. This one. So that's your Twitter location. That's a fast link through Twitter to the Discord location. Whatever. Please drop by and say hello. I'd love to see you. Anyway, where were we? We're going to get parents. It no longer needs to be able to pass between threads because it's no longer using a mutex. And it's still complaining about the threading. I think it's trying to say that no component. All components need to be multi-threaded. So this is specs trying to make sure that it can do multi-threaded dispatching. But the types that I've got here, the ones to do with Godot, aren't safe to send over multiple threads. And this is something that got mentioned before, where we just have to just straight up suck it up and just say, no. Hey, it's fine. It's fine. You can send these things between threads. So, and the things we're trying to protect. So, you're right, we're constructor. So, I was concerned that by saying the word mutex, I was trying to say that the stuff in here has to be safe between threads. But what it's actually complaining about is that if I derive any components for anything, for like GD scene location, that's fine actually, that one's fine. But for spatial, it's probably, if you look at ST Spatial, you'll see it contains this class from Godot that represents, something in the game. If you look at this one, this resource, there was a resource somewhere. This resource contains spatials in it. Those things are a no-no because they're FFI instructions and they're not safe to send or sync. Because it's random functions into Godot. So we have to kind of promise that we're going to be good with those and not evil. And the way we make a promise about that is we tell Godot unsafe impl send for GD world data. Right? Ta-da. And now that'll be fine. Promise. And we need to do the same promise for anything else that uses a Godot type. So here's another one. Impl send for GD Spatial. And so we're either promising that it's always going to be safe, which is probably not true, but what we are actually promising is that we're going to keep it safe somehow. I'm really bending the meaning of unsafe in the SG core stuff. I don't like it very much. The API for Godot is a little bit ropey in this way. It doesn't make me happy. I don't use unsafe at all in any of the other simulation code. And I'm just trying to keep all the mess. All the mess should hopefully end up just in this little block here that we're creating today. So play carefully, folks. But in this boundary between C++ and Rust, where we're working, because Godot's in C++, in that boundary, things get a bit fuzzy between unsafe and safe. And if the Godot Rust bindings were more mature, it wouldn't be such a big deal for me. It would be more of a problem for the library. Okay, so GD entity creation. Let's have Godot types in it. Yeah, this 3D template contains Godot types. So I have to say the same promise, but for GD entity creation. Don't worry, it's safe to send this pointer that refers to another binary. It's safe to send that between threads. So we need Implement a system. Just staring at this really frightening looking error message and trying to figure out which type is it wanting send on. I'm a bit stuck as to why this isn't working. This unsafe impulse send for GD Spatial isn't getting rid of that error. Do I need to impulse sync as well? I'm getting really uncomfortable about this. Which is kind of the point. It's supposed to make me uncomfortable. It's working. I can tell you. Write storage, read storage. GD scene lock. I need the same promise for this as well. Difficult compile issues. I think we're down to the last one. I think we're finally almost there. Okay. Entity create. What have I missed? Trying to make a system called entity creation, but the problem isn't that. It's one of these. GD world data. Yeah, so that's probably the problem. Okay, we've got new problems now to do with default missing. So I can't derive a default for a GD scene lock because this template doesn't have a default. So I could say there is a default which is none, which is probably the best way of going about it. Just say, look, it's invisible. Yeah, that's what we'll do. Doesn't implement debug. So, and in order to derive those templates, I need to go into here and derive them here as well. Okay. Can it be formatted? Yeah. Let's try again. So we need to implement default ourselves for entity 3D template. We need to specify that if nothing's specified, it's going to be the none option. So maybe we can make a mesh. Specifically make a mesh that's designed around, yeah, we'll just choose none. So the default is going to be implement a method that returns the default, and what it returns is this entity 3D template none. So whenever I don't specifically initialize one, it's always going to be that one. Okay, so you can't do equal and partial equal. Yeah, because if those internal ones don't have them, we can't do it ourselves. Which means we can't put them here. So you can't ask if two GDC locks are the same overall. You can't compare these pointers for equality. World data doesn't have a parent. Let's have a look at GD world data, because dref should have the parents. It's because I didn't call it parent, I called it parents. No method called get found for a hash map. Okay. Self.templates.get is a hash map. For some reason the hash map get has stopped working here. So that's really weird. Possibly because it's wrapped inside of all this stuff. Maybe we need to go star parents get. Or just .dref. Oh, it's because it's a result. That's why. This is what we were talking about a very long time ago. When I first wrote this code, there was a question asked about whether I should put a question mark here. So we just go parents dot okay, and also parents get. That'll mean if there's no dictionary of parents, it's okay. Oh, it's not and also, it's and then. Wow, it's getting really late. I'm getting really tired. There's still a list of bugs to fix. So let me just take what I've got, and I want to close out on a high note real quick. I appreciate you guys watching. It's interesting. I was expecting to see a lot more modified files here. It's confusing. I hope I didn't just undo all my work. No, I don't think I did. So why doesn't it show more files changed? Maybe because most of the files that changed are ones that I'd added. Anyway, so I've added all these files to the project. So normally when I make a commit to mark a point like this, I'm just going to unstage these. I'll put a prefix here saying whip because it doesn't currently compile. And what I've done is I've make components and systems to link Godot into specs ECS. So that's all the stuff that we've done tonight. We're still a long way from working. I'll make create a tag, a new tag here, whip ECS. The creating a tag is just to make sure that there's no way I can lose this commit from what I'm about to do where I go back in time. I wanted to just check out this older version that compiled. Check out. Yes. That's just a warning that I needed to put a tag there, basically. Having put a tag there, I won't lose my work. If I forget to put a tag there, there is a way to recover it. You can Google it if you ever lose your commits. You can recover lost objects. Anyway, now that I've gone back in time, I should be able to just quickly give you one last little demo. So, see, this is the server running. Here's the game compiling and running. Here's the game launching. So this is a space game that we're currently trying to make, and all the synchronization logic you've been watching me do. We've currently gone back to the older version just so I can give a quick demo. But all the stuff you've been watching me do is to the aim of trying to build these little modules directly from the ECS. These little walls, and in the game already we can build floors. When the network sync isn't having a tizzy, it looks like the network sync is having a tizzy, so I'll just try running the client a second time. There are a few little edge cases that don't work, and I have not trying to. So you see this one's synchronized to these changes where I built the floor. There's a bunch of models I need to make around these funny joins in the walls that need to be fixed. But you can build walls, you can build a desk for you to fly at. You can put your little person over there. That's client side wandering around. There's also the server side moving of the player puck. That's the player puck over here. So this is all stuff you're going to see working soon enough. These guys are both very excited to have the chance to use this console. Down the track, when I push the button, this whole ship's going to fly. In order to make the ship fly, I need to change a hard-coded string in the code base. Yeah. So it's all coming along, and we're going to have conveyors, and they're going to carry all sorts of good things, and we're going to have fun times. But right now it's late, and I need to go to bed, and I really appreciate you guys watching. So please jump on the Twitter and sign in and follow me, come back, link up, whatever. All the words that mean follow in Twitch, and show me your appreciation if you enjoyed watching this Rust code. And hopefully tomorrow I'll come up with something quite elegant that synchronizes the Rust and the specs. And oh my god, I'm just falling asleep in front of the camera. Good night, everyone. It's always a pleasure. Have a nice sleep. Or a nice day if your day's just starting. See you later. It's midnight, by the way. It's midnight here. Oh my god, why did I stay up so late? It was such a pleasure working with you. I just couldn't stop. That's why.